Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's fabulous guest chat where we are going all the way across the pond to the US to chat with Sarah Tai. Now, Sarah is an energy reader. She's a spiritual channel. She's all about helping people to clear their blocks to help them to thrive in life. We may even be getting a live tarot read during this chat, just to give a little bit of a secret away there. I can't wait. We are so in tune. We met online, and I've been a guest on Sarah's own podcast, which is the Spirit. I'm just check I've got this right. It's called the Spirit Journey Collective, and I loved being a guest on that show. So do check that out. All the links are in the show notes, and you can, have a look at me on the other side being interviewed by Sarah. Okay, I'm going to bring Sarah on. That's it, everybody listening. We're just doing live sound checks because this is the thing. We're going right across the other side of the world, pretty much. What time is it there, Sarah?
It is 10 a.m. in the morning, and we're in the shadow of the Mercury retrograde, which always messes up technology.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've really felt it this time. And I read recently about the shadow because I was looking at when the day ended, and then it said about the shadow period. Is it 2 weeks? Is it?
I think it's about 2 weeks. Yeah.
And I was like, oh no, I thought I was done. It was the full moon. We had the eclipse and the retrograde, so it's been quite heavy. I'm sure we'll chat about things like this, but which area are you in the US? I wasn't so sure which part you're in.
I'm in California, so I'm about an hour away from LA in Hollywood.
Ah, lovely. How is it there? Is it quite, do you ever go into LA?
No, I really avoid the city as much as possible.
It's not your scene.
No. And the odds of running into a celebrity is pretty slim unless you like live there and you're there all the time. So
Yeah.
I avoid it because there's lots of honking and traffic and all the things I can't stand. So yeah, I avoid it unless I have to be there.
I think I'd be the same as you. I live out in the countryside. I love it. I can go into the city if I want to and retreat. Come back to me. So yeah, I can't wait for this chat. I was just doing an introduction there that I've been a guest on your podcast if people want to see me on the other side. And I've just introduced you, but I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey, how you came to where you are now, everything that you do, and your passions. Yeah, anything you want to share.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how far you've gone with my introduction, but I am a tarot reader, which already starts off a little bit of like, oh, what really, and finding that work, I think, was really just the biggest part of my journey. I've always been a reader. I've been reading since high school. So this is a passion that's gone back at least 20 years now. And it was something I just did for fun. And it was really part of me breaking out of old traditional religion that just didn't feel good to me anymore. But about 7, 8 years ago was when I realized that this deck, these tarot cards, were more than just entertainment. For the longest time, I just thought they were fun and woo-woo, and let's pull them out and see what the cards have to say. But about 7, 8 years ago, I was going through a huge transition in my life where I had to make the decision on whether or not I was going to leave my marriage. And it was due to abusive reasons, and he was fighting his own addictive, demons and addiction demons. And I turned to my cards and I said, I don't know what to do. And out of all the cards in the deck, and there's 78 cards, and I could go into the mechanics of it later. That's a lot of cards with a lot of different meanings. And what came through was if I stayed, it was going to get worse. If I left, I had a chance for new beginnings. And of all the cards, it was like, oh, that's not only did it like really just shake me up, but also I already knew the answer. That was key. I already knew what I should be doing. The cards just happened to tell me exactly what it was. And so I fast forward, I would turn to my cards for various different reasons, and they were consistent and they were always helpful. And in a lot of ways, just plugged into what I already knew. I just needed that little bit of confidence. And then when 2020 came, the world shut down and we all were trying to figure out, at least for me, and I think many though as well, trying to figure out what are we doing with our life. And I plugged into my spirituality and, plugged into my belief system and what I resonate with, which was wonderful. And then I started hearing about this thing called purpose. And I was like, oh, what is that? I want one of those. That sounds amazing. And tarot kept coming to me. And I was like, oh no, that's not it. It
Oh,
can't be it. Because I was just so afraid of the stigma and the judgment. And I didn't really see it being a good place to plug into. but it just kept coming up till I finally was like, okay, fine, I will try it, and then it was magic. The moment I started doing it, it just felt like I was coming home to myself. And it felt like me. And not only that, but I was seeing how much of an impact I was making for those that I was helping. So it really just put me into this place of, wow, I found this thing that I love, that lights me up, that just I'm so passionate about. And I get to help other people in the process.
Wow. Oh, that is one of the most unique. I always talk about a personal brand journey, a brand story, business journey. For you, that's, we say about talk, find your purpose. It actually finds you. So to me, that's the most unique version I've heard of this, where you were actually saying, no, I don't want this. It's, you were a little bit afraid of it, but it kept coming back to you. I mean, how has that stigma been since you made that official, since you decided, right, okay, it keeps coming for me. This is actually something I'm going to explore. Because I talk about this a lot in people's brands, being scared to be themselves, being scared to be online and show up as their authentic selves. Was that a big thing still when you finally decided, or had you already overcome that block by then?
I was terrified.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very scared. I was more worried about like what would people say? What would they think? Which I know a lot of people stepping into their own business, their own brand have those same feelings. But I feel like for mine, because there is so much of a stigma with it, it was like, I was honestly afraid that I was going to get like messages from people like telling me I was a double worshiper and things like that. Like, I mean, I had a lot of fears around it, especially going public and showing my friends and family, like, okay, I'm going to try doing my own business here. But honestly, nothing really came of it. And so the more I did it, the more I got the confirmation from the people I did readings for and seeing how good it was and the impact it was making. And not getting that backlash I was really expecting, it really just helped me lean more into it and understand that, you know what, I was more afraid of the fear than than something that was actually worth being afraid of, because it never turned into anything scary. And I mean, even when I started doing farmers markets, again, I was afraid I was going to get someone like throwing the Bible at me or something, to the extreme. I didn't know what to expect. And I mean, it's so funny because people will avoid my booth, like very obviously avoid my booth. I just laugh at it now because I'm like, you know what? It's okay. You're not meant to talk to me today. And those that are meant to will come to me, and they do. And so, it's not as scary as I think many people think it is when it comes to really stepping outside of their comfort zone and putting it out there. I mean, if I can do it in a field that is scary and taboo, then anything that's not any of those things would be much easier. And likely any fears that they're feeling is just the fear itself. It's not tied to anything in reality. And that's probably been my biggest aha moment is I don't really need to be afraid. And now that I know myself more, I'm more in tune with what I do. I trust and have more confidence in what I do. When I do come up against people, which is not very often, who will immediately just tell me that they don't agree with what I'm doing or it's not for them. But they do it in such a way where they're kind of making it feel like I'm doing something wrong. I'm able to just say, that's fine. I totally respect you and move on. It doesn't phase me anymore because I think I had that time period of like, oh, people are just going to avoid me if it's not for them. And that's totally fine.
Yeah, it is. And that's such a powerful message. It's something I say on repeat. And I think it's something that comes with experience for somebody new in business, or as you say, new in that area. It's super scary. And imagine if you'd not have taken that step out of that fear. But it's okay, isn't it, for people to not like what you're doing or not to connect with what you're doing. They're just not your people. And that's the way you've got to see it, isn't it? Any perceived judgment or any actual judgment, we have to just let it bounce off us in a way, which isn't easy, is it? Have you had that where, especially the farmers market, let's talk about that because I think online's a little bit different. We can almost hide behind online a little bit. Actually being there in person, how did it feel? And how did you get past any fear that did come up?
Honestly, I think I just had to and that's a great question because that's probably the times that I feel the most self-conscious. And I'll have to just, especially when I even sit next to other, vendors who may or may not. And the other thing I get nervous about was, oh my gosh, what will they think when they see they're sitting next to a tarot reader? But the thing that I probably learned in the last couple of months And so I've been leaning more into that, is this idea of, you know what, I'm just going to show up as me, and I'm going to show up and I'm going to be friendly and cordial and connect with them. And I'm just not going to let whatever they think bother me. Because, and it's so funny because, I say like throwing the Bible at me, whatever, like my personal beliefs, I think that all religions are right. So like, I totally respect everyone's modality. And to be honest, I probably work with a good 60% of Christians. Like most of my clients are Christians, which is totally fine. So I don't have any prejudices against anyone else. It's more the fear of that coming to me. And so with farmers markets, the first thing that really helped me, honestly, was I had to almost smile and inwardly laugh at people who would like do a very obvious arc around my booth, because they do like, they'd walk by and they do this like they do the once over, and they just like, oh, don't make eye contact, and I almost just have to like, that's okay. It's not their fault. They were programmed and conditioned to believe this certain idea through Hollywood and religion and society that this isn't okay, even though they have no idea how beautiful this actual work is. And then what happens too is every time I'm at a farmer's market, and without fail, I will always have a reading there that I know I was supposed to have it. I was supposed to connect with that person. They were supposed to get the guidance that came through to them. And then that makes it worth it. Then it makes all those people who avoid me and look at me kind of funny, they just kind of blur into the background, because the person who really needed to sit with me was able to do so.
Wow. Yeah, love that. And that is, again, another message for people listening. That is so true, that if we let the people that aren't for us stop us from doing what we're here to do, you talk about that purpose and the people we're here to help. If we just let the people that we're never going to work with, they're never going to maybe understand what we do. Although I'll come to a question in a second. There was a question I was going to ask, but that's okay, isn't it? We can't let them stop us from helping the people that actually need the work that we do. And the question I was going to ask about these farmers market, we'll come back to online in a moment, but I'm fascinated by this because the world is very much online nowadays. But people listening that might go to a networking event in person, they might go to a different event. And again, that safety net of the online, they're going into the real world and having to really show the self. So this is why I'm loving this conversation. But has there been anybody that's come and has maybe not openly given judgment, but maybe they've asked a few questions, or you've known that they've not really understood it and they haven't come to you yet, then they've come to you later, whether that is at the farmers market or online? Have you had that where people have been scared themselves and something's changed and they've come to you after all?
So not so much at the farmers market, and if online, it's not one that I've, you know, seen directly, but that may have happened where they watched me from a distance and then finally was like, okay, I'm going to get a reading. But I will say I see this a lot at events. So I also do events where people hire me for weddings, bachelorette parties, birthday parties, corporate, etc. And I see it a lot there, where there will always be one or two people who will like, oh no, I'm not sitting with her. And I want to say probably 50% of the time they eventually do. And so I love those particular readings, especially because they're always afraid, and they'll sit down and they'll say, don't tell me I'm going to die tomorrow or something,
No.
And I'm like, first of all, I couldn't tell you that even if I wanted to. Second of all, that's not what this is about. This is more about you connecting with yourself. And I think that's my favorite part about events, is whether it's someone who's terrified to sit with me and eventually does, or even if they weren't scared to sit with me like that, I want to say probably a good 90% of the people who do sit with me have never had a reading before. And so they're all still kind of going in with this idea of what they think they're going to get, and then leaving with something else entirely. And it's always more profound and more like, oh, I thought this was just entertainment, but this is actually, I got something from this. And so I love to be in that position where I get to actually shift mindsets, even and especially in a party setting, because no one, everyone's already, their guards are dropped, they're having a good time, you know what I mean? But it's just in that sense where they're able to take something really meaningful from it. And so I see it a lot more in that environment, where I'll hear about someone openly like avoiding me, and then they eventually sit with me, and it's pretty cool to see the shift that happens.
It's a good job you don't take it personal, isn't it? People avoiding you. You're like, it's not me, it's just what I do. And they are just afraid and they come over. With the tarot, something you touched on before about when you made that huge decision in your own life about whether you should stick with it or not. I mean, that's huge. And turning to the cards, I guess, probably felt quite comforting in that moment in time. But if something you said about that you already knew in your heart. So if somebody comes to you and they have absolutely no clue, they are so blocked and they just can't make that decision, does that affect the cards, would you say? Does it have to be that we already have a bit of a knowing, or can it be the opposite where we still don't have a clue, the cards still work with you?
I love this question. So it's so funny. Even if someone comes to me and they don't think they know what to do and they're blocked and they're scared and they're confused and they're whatever, still 9 times out of 10, when after I'm done with the reading, they'll end up saying something like, I knew that. I
Ah,
already knew that. They just weren't able to see it. They weren't able to connect with it because of the fog they were in. So one of the things that I love about tarot is it's not, and especially as a reader, I don't ever tell you what to do. I don't ever tell the clients I work with what to do ever. And I'm really careful about my verbiage. I'll say something like, this is the invitation. This is what you're being guided into. But it's totally, I'm 100% believer of free will. So you should be able to decide those things for yourself. But, when people sit with me, they expect me to do something woo-woo, right? They expect me to do something super mysterious. And often it's almost like they want me to tell them something they don't know. But what happens is I end up telling them something that they already know. It's like they end up getting the confirmation and the validation that they didn't know they needed until they sat with me. And one thing I like to say too is it's not me, because some people will be like, oh my gosh, you're like, can you read our minds? Are you like all knowing? And I'm like, no, I'm just the channel. Like spirit is showing up for you. Your higher self is showing up for you, because I do believe we're energetically all connected. And so I think it's intention. When someone's sitting with me with the intention of I need guidance, and I'm sitting with the intention of opening up as a channel and just being the middleman, that's where the magic happens. And then that's why I hear things all the time like, oh my gosh, I was just thinking that exact same thing like 2 or 3 days ago, and I didn't even say it out loud. I hear that all the time, because what's happening is I'm plugging into you, and what's coming through is what you already know. And so I think that there's almost more of a trusting in it too, because I don't know you. I don't know the people I sit with, unless they're like clients who've seen me for forever. If they're a new client, I don't know them. And yet I'm able to pick up on the nuances of the situation and what they're going through, and then give guidance on how to get through it and get over it, which I think all of those pieces tend to be something that they are like, it's like for them, I feel like they have the pieces already in them. They just don't know how to put them together. And the reading itself helps them put them together and make that picture and make it make sense.
yeah, love that. And that is again something super powerful, that we all have this inside of us. And it's just trusting that intuition sometimes, isn't it? And something that, even something quite recently, without giving too much of my journey, but I, like yourself, I had to make a decision around, do I stay or not? And it really affected my self-trust. So I've always been quite intuitive, quite self-trusting. I do trust those decisions or the info that comes to me, because I'm a bit like you. I go to these sister circles. Used to be once a month, it's now every few months. And we do pick a card at the end. So I'm quite open to that. But once I'd been through a bad situation or a negative experience where the trust wasn't fully there for myself, that became difficult. And what's your advice to somebody who maybe they are quite intuitive, but they might have gone through something where they feel blocked and they're not trusting that intuition? Have you had that where people have come to you feeling that way, where they've just started to question the trust and whether that impacts how they read the cards?
All the time. And I think that that's why it's so profound when the readings validate what they've already been feeling and confirm what they've already been feeling. It helps them really reconnect with that inner compass that they already have. So what I do, like one of the advices I'll give, and this is for more of the intuitive side, like if you tend to get gut feelings that maybe you're like, I don't know, this feels crazy, I'm going to ignore it. But then later on, you're like, why did I ignore it? I wish I listened to it. Those, when it comes to the high, that's a lot of that will be with the high priestess card. It's all about intuition, third eye, psychic abilities, things like that. And so with that card, what I do recommend is if you get gut feelings, write them down. And maybe the first time, just write it down and don't do anything with it. But then you have like the documented proof that you did. Because sometimes I think in hindsight, we're like, well, did I really get the gut feeling not to do that? Because you almost second guess whether or not you did get anything telling you should or shouldn't. So if you get that gut feeling, what I like to recommend is at first, write it down. And then maybe not do anything the first time, but just you have the documented proof that you had that inkling, right? And then write down how it turned out. And then the next time you get that feeling, write it down and then do what you feel like you're being called to do. And then write down the outcome. And the more you do that, I think you start to not only trust yourself, but you'll start learning what the intuitive gut feelings are in your body versus just your ego and your mind up here, because it can be tricky. Sometimes we think this is intuition, and other time and it's not. It's just like the monkey brain trying to find solutions, whereas intuition is usually quiet. It usually comes in and it'll be a small tap on the shoulder and then it'll retreat. And then sometimes it'll come back in like waves, but it doesn't sit there and ruminate like the mind will do. And so, I mean, that's one way to get more in tune with your more like daily gut feelings or intuitive. It's like an intuitive practice. But as far as, if you're just feeling like, I don't know if I trust myself, the thing is, so whether you go to see a tarot reader or whether or not you pick up your own deck of cards, it doesn't really matter. You can use it for yourself the same way and, pull cards and just ask for, the beauty of working with a reader is we already know how to interpret the cards and you have the intuitive piece in it too. So it makes it a little bit smoother. But if you want to do it on your own, you can. It's not something that's only for readers. You know what I mean? So I would say that the beautiful thing about tarot is it does allow you to a lot of the times confirm what you already know, which will help build your intuition and help your self-trust. Because when, like I said, 78 cards out of a whole deck can confirm what you're already feeling, then there's something to that, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm a believer in, so I have become quite woo, quite spiritual these last few years. And I'm a big believer, although I do have those wobbles. I think we naturally all have wobbles in our trust, in our self-trust, our intuition. But in the bigger picture, I believe that the universe does have our back. And I can imagine with that, I can imagine almost putting that to one side and thinking, no, that's not for me, or people maybe being a little bit resistant. But I always think the universe brings it to you anyway, doesn't it? Whichever way. Have you had that where even in yourself you picked up a card, maybe resisted it, and you picked up the same card or something that said the other way? It's something in that where it always comes to you, doesn't it? I think what's meant for you. There's a saying, isn't there? Is it what's meant for you will come to you? Something like that.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, yes, all the time, especially when I do my own readings. That's why sometimes I'll purposely go to somebody else, because if they're getting what I'm getting, then I'm like, okay, you know what I mean? But so, because there are times, especially as a reader, like you can get too close to your question and want to see what you want to see versus what's coming through. And so there are times where I'll see cards and I'm like, oh no, I don't want that one. No, no. But then intuitively, I kind of know it's the fact, it's true. And I think that that's just part of our human journey. I mean, like for instance, when I sit with a client, it's so I think one of my gifts is I'm able to remove my ego. I'm able to remove my judgment because the reading's not for me. So I just read the cards, I become this open channel and I could just share with them what's coming through. When it comes to reading for myself, it's not that clear. I have a lot of my own judgment and my own thoughts about it. And it makes it harder for me to have more of that objective reading. It's more subjective than objective. So, I mean, yeah, that definitely happens all the time. And it's learning to, I like to say that all the cards are medicine. Some are just more bittersweet than others. And even as a reader, there are times where I pull cards and I'm like, I don't want that one. That's not the answer I wanted.
I've had that. So I don't do it very often, but I've gone through these circles, and sometimes 9 times out of 10 is a card that I pick up, and I'm like, oh, I feel really connected to that. And then sometimes I picked it up and I almost thought, can I sneakily put this down and pick the next one up? I don't want that one. But like you said, I've had to accept it and then just see how that pans out. Because that's another thing, that sometimes something will make immediate sense. I think sometimes the cards, it's almost like this is in time. You are going to discover what this means. Or do you feel like we do know in that moment, even if it's perceived as a negative card that you don't necessarily want, do you think, is it always in front of us, or is it something that could happen?
Yeah, it definitely is something that can come in waves or come down the line. I have a really funny story that happened fairly recently that kind of showcases this. I was at a party that I was hired for. It was a 16th birthday party, but it was with the same family that had hired me for a Mardi Gras party a couple months prior. So a lot of these people that I had sat with before. And so they got me set up, and the dad of the 16-year-old, made sure I was good. And then he turned to a gentleman sitting in the backyard near me and he goes, oh, do you want to get a reading with her? And the guy said, nope, she didn't tell me anything good last time.
Oh no.
I didn't really know how to respond to that. I was just like, I'm sorry. And keep in mind, because I am that channel, I don't retain what I share. It comes in the moment. So I don't even know what I told him. And I didn't remember. And then, of course, I'm thinking back, like, I don't remember anyone not liking their reading, or getting negative feedback last time. So I was like, oh. But then the guy looked at me. It probably took like a minute or two. Then he looked at me and he said, but you know what? I was in a bad mood that day. And really, all you did was tell me that I needed to get off my butt and start doing stuff, which
Mm.
was true because I was watching TV all day and not doing anything with my life. And since we've talked, I've actually started doing that. I've been getting more out there. And, yeah, you were basically right. So I'm so glad he shared that extra bit because that made me feel way better because I didn't know how to respond to that initial, like, like, oh, she didn't tell me anything good. And I was like, ugh. But then he did follow that up with his own retrospection of what had happened and how he experienced it and then how it actually made a difference for him. So yeah, it doesn't always come in the moment where you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes there is resistance. Sometimes you don't want to hear the message or you're not ready for the message. And that happens too. There's been times where I give readings where I always see the positive spin on it because I know that every single card is for you. I know that even the heavier handed ones are there to help you grow and evolve. But I've done readings for people who, for instance, I gave a reading for this one woman, and to me, it looked pretty positive. It was a love reading, but it was like what she needed to know to call in her partner. And don't get me wrong, there was definitely a lot of invitation around growth and healing and things that she needed to do first before she would be in the right vibrational level to call in a healthy partner. So I was looking at that like, oh yeah, that's perfect. I mean, obviously there's some work to be done, but there's some like clear steps here. And then after I was done, she's like, so nothing good then.
Oh,
And I tried to show her what I was seeing, and she just wasn't able to. So that doesn't happen terribly often, but I think that it just depends on how open you are, how ready you are. And I mean, and that goes for everyone who's human. Like I said, as a reader, there are times where I pull cards and I'm like, I don't like that. And then I have to sit with it and figure out because I trust the cards and I trust spirit enough to know that if it came through, there's a reason. And so that's why sometimes I'll go to another reader who can maybe interpret it in a way that I'm able to, okay, I can wrap my head around that one. Or they're able to at least explain it in a way where maybe I still don't like it, but yeah, I see, you know what I mean?
yeah.
So everyone has those moments where potentially where they don't like what comes through. But I want to say probably a good 90% of the time, myself and with the clients I sit with, they're pretty happy with what came through because I think it's what they already knew and expected, but they just didn't know it yet.
Yeah. And even as you're saying this, I'm getting a real sense that this could be a thing in life, can't it? Depending on how open we are to receive. This we're talking about tarot, but we could be talking about developing an abundance mindset that, you've got to be open to receive and to believe in a way. And I just think that by forgetting what I'm saying here, I've kind of gone off track a little bit. But with the woman who wasn't particularly pleased with that answer, if she'd have come to you on a different day in a different mindset, she would have been open to receive, wouldn't she? So it must be difficult for you, even though it's 90% that like it. How do you deal with that, even that 10% that do give a bit of a negative vibe? I'm assuming because you've done that work where you are quite, what's the word, compassionate for the people who just walk on by. But when they're in front of you saying that that's a negative experience for them, how does that feel? Because I think a lot of people in business, in life, we don't cope with rejection well, and that could be perceived as that. So how have you dealt with that in that moment?
Usually I'll just apologize. Like, I'm sorry that it's not resonating. It's one of the things that I will go to as well as I'll say that I'm not the advisor for everyone. So that's another thing as well. Maybe they need to hear this message, but they need to hear it from someone else. Kind of like I was saying, where sometimes I need a different perspective to help me see this better. So it could be a number of things. And that's kind of what I have to lean into because I am a recovering people pleaser. So there is that part of me that wants to like suddenly make it better. And when they're just not open, there's nothing I can do. And that is hard for me, especially when they walk away, feel like basically I could tell they're just like not happy with what I said to them. So I think for me, kind of leaning back to, I'm not going to connect with everyone and I'm not the advisor for everyone. I think that helps me cope in those moments. And I'm grateful that they're very far and few between. Um, but that's kind of how I deal with it, because it is hard in those moments. I want to share something that is meaningful and impactful. And when it doesn't land that way, it is difficult.
Yeah, and I can resonate with that. I was saying I'm a recovered people pleaser, but it's never fully recovered. I can slip back into that way if something comes up like that where I want them to like something. Maybe for me, maybe it's more I'm doing the brand strategy, I'm doing some copywriting for them, and I've maybe taken some time, presented these name ideas to them, and they hate them. And I'm thinking, I've put my soul into this. It's really difficult. But same thing that I just give myself that sort of compassion into them and I'll say, right, well, let's look at this a different way, or I'll refer you to somebody else if we really don't work together. So I think that's really brilliant that you're able to see that. And do you think that is a part of your own journey? Because I think this in anyone who is crazy enough to be an entrepreneur, really, that we have to have such thick skin, don't we? We have to have done some inner work ourselves to be able to cope with moments like that. So how have you found that yourself? Have you actively worked on yourself, like the people pleasing?
Yes, a lot. Boundary work has been my best friend. I've been doing boundary work now for probably about 4 years. And for those that are like, what's boundary work? Or they're just starting that journey, I highly recommend the author Brene Brown. She really highlights the importance of boundary work, but in a compassionate way. But so that I think has been really helpful in this work is having clear boundaries with myself. But I think also I was called into this work. I mean, I was literally pulled into it from my higher power. Like I all the ways the doors open and I found myself and everything worked out. Like I already know I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And I've also learned, and this one was hard. This one in the very beginning of my journey was super hard, was, with the people pleasing, recovering, all of that. When I get a message that I know isn't what they want to hear, because when you have someone sit with you and they're expectant of, like, especially like a relationship or something like that, usually you kind of know they want something positive. And when something not so positive comes through, in the beginning, I had a hard time being not honest, like not, I wasn't dishonest, but I had a really hard time sharing what I was getting. But over time, the thing that I've learned is, and I really just hold on to, is I don't edit. I don't edit the messages. I don't sugarcoat it. I'll say it gently and I'll say it with tact. And like I said, I like to use soft language like invitation, guided, because I don't want anyone to feel like it's heavy. Nothing is heavy handed. I mean, I can do you can do this or this, and I could definitely be feeling, ooh, this one is the better option. And they might still choose the one that's less ideal. It's not my business. That just means they have more lessons to learn on the one that's not ideal. So I'm doing this over and over again and trusting that higher power, and trusting, because what happens is when I do these readings, even when I get, like, I want to say I get 90% of the time, even when I get a reading that I'm like, oh, please don't hate me. Please don't hate me when I'm done. It's like my thought process. They're totally like, that makes perfect sense. Everything you're saying. They needed it. They didn't want the sugarcoat. They didn't want the edit. That's not what they're paying me for. They're paying me to be that channel for them to help them see the clarity. So that has helped me a lot. It's just knowing, like, and I'll tell them I don't edit, I don't sugarcoat. So if I can't see another way to read this, this is what I'm going to share. And I'm sorry if it doesn't land, but either I'm not connecting with you properly and I'm not the right advisor for you, or you're just not ready to hear the message. Either way, I'm doing what my job is, which is to pull the cards and share what I'm feeling and seeing. And so I think just leaning more into that. And I've been in so many situations where I'm like, I don't want to read for that. I don't want to say that, but I do. And I get confirmation and validation back that it was what they needed. So because I've done that so many times, that has helped me trust it more. And so that's really kind of how I use my mindset. But with my journey overall, I think my biggest part of my journey has been finding myself and learning how to trust myself, and learning that it's okay that I'm not traditional, and in a lot of ways it doesn't make me less than, and it doesn't make me bad or anything like that. I think that's been more of my journey, but it does tie a lot into that people pleasing, because I want to be accepted. I want to be liked by everyone. And so I think that it has been a huge part of my journey, between working with clients, myself, advertising my business. Like there's been times where I want to go and introduce myself to different local restaurants and see, hey, can I maybe set up and do readings here? But I hold back because I'm like, what would they think of me? Even now, I've been doing this for 3 years. So I'm still constantly having to push myself to, not worry so much about what other people think. And it's definitely a journey. And that's why I like to say I'm a recovering people pleaser, because it's definitely an inner battle.
Yeah, it really is. And I think I should say recovering, not recovered, because then, yeah, something trips me up and I'm like, oh, my mind's just gone back there again. I want them to be happy with me. And as you say, sometimes you've got to deliver that tough love. And that's how I see it, actually. If people aren't necessarily on board with it and they wanted an easier solution, I think, again, in business, in life, people do want the easy route. We want the fluffy unicorn version. But the tough stuff, like with what I do, branding, people can jump straight to the pretty design, or I pull them back and make them dig deep. What are you about? That is hard stuff. In a way, you're asking them to do that. You're looking at this card that they didn't want, but they've got it and it's tough. And they're then taking a lesson from it and moving on from that. Have you had that where people have then come back to you? Maybe they've left disgruntled and that people pleasing kicked in where you're like, oh no, I don't want you to be unhappy. Have they ever come back to you afterwards? And maybe this is not at events, but possibly your own clients. I don't know, where they've come back to you and thanked you and said, I didn't know I needed that, but thank you afterwards. Not necessarily at the time.
Yeah, that's happened a couple of times and it's usually several months down the line, to the point where I usually have no idea. So it's probably why I don't have these stories like right at the ready, because it's usually several months in between. And then they have to retell me what they asked and what I told them. So I have definitely heard that before, where they're like, oh my gosh, you were so right, this, and this. And, and so I do hear that occasionally. I think sometimes people don't always come back to. I think that there's that too, even if it played out the way that. And again, and one thing I wanted to preface too, I don't do predictive type readings. So a lot of it'll tell you kind of where you're headed as of right now, but it's more about the present. I always like to say that, because some people think it's fortune telling, and it's not. It's more about working through yourself and retrospection and everything else. But what usually they end up coming back and telling me is more so the things and the blocks and the things that they weren't ready to hear. And then later on, they're like, I finally saw it. I finally saw that this needed to go because it was holding me back. That sort of thing I'll hear. And, and the thing is, I don't think everyone will come back to me, even if that was the case, even if it played out that way and they had to go through all of it. They may not, it still might even be one of those things where they remember they didn't like the reading and they're not able to put the two and two together, that it was like a catalyst for them. Kind of like that one gentleman at that one event. But it's happened a couple of times. And again, they'll fill me in on what I shared with them and how it played out.
Yeah, you're thinking, I've no idea what I said to you 2 years ago, whatever it was, but they're coming to you, they're remembering it. But there's something in that. There's something that I'm loving about the way you approach this, that you are the channel, you are bringing it to them, and then it's gone and you're not carrying that weight for them. Because I guess a lot of people, like quite an empath, a lot of people are in the entrepreneurial world, especially in what you do actually with spiritual soulful jobs. You're such an empath. I can imagine people taking on people's energy and almost storing it and it feeling quite a lot in their role. But I love that you're able to, it just sounds like you pass on the message and then you just carry on. It's not yours to carry then, is it? And I think people in business could learn a lot from that. I think it's a really nice way to do. Is that just something that naturally happens from the work that you do? Or did you decide that that was just how you were going to do it?
It was definitely an evolution. So one of the first things that I did when I started my business was like psychic hotlines, which I will never do again. But it was really good practice for me to really figure out what it was like dealing with people's energies. So it's so funny, because before I did this work, I heard of crystals. I liked them. They were pretty. I heard that amethyst might be good for this and citrine might be good for that, but I didn't pay attention. I honestly didn't really believe it. So, it was just like, whatever. When I started doing the hotline work, I was so drained. I mean, it was like, I was like, what is happening? I have no energy. I just feel like depleted. And the thing especially with psychic hotline work, you're dealing with a lot of desperate people and low vibrational energy. it's rare you come across someone who is just there to get some guidance and clarity. It's usually, is he coming back? Is he thinking about me? Is he cheating on me? Things like that, which I just, and now that I'm at where I'm at, I do not answer those kinds of questions. I will happily read on a relationship and tell you the energies around it, but I don't do those really basic kind of surface level questions. They just drain the heck out of me. But that's a lot of the psychic hotline work, which is why I don't do it anymore. But it did give me thick skin and I did learn a lot from it. But I told a friend of mine that I was so depleted and I didn't really know how to deal with it. And she's like, oh, sounds like you need some tourmaline. And I was like, is that a crystal? I didn't even know what it was. And so she gave me a list of different crystals. And so that was my first taste into, oh, there's energy happening here. So yeah, it's definitely been trial and error. When I do Zoom readings, it's a lot easier for me to unplug. Although, I mean, there's usually a moment where after I'm done with the reading, I have to kind of like, because I take it on, I feel it. It's a lot of energy moving. I really feel it during events. Those are the big ones. When I'm sitting for 2 to 5 hours in front of 50 to 100 people in a day, I'm like done. I'm done. At the end of the event, I'm like, I want to go home. I want to lay down. I just want to like, just not do anything. So, I mean, it still does impact me for sure. But I think when it comes to like the one-on-one readings that are, more spaced out, it is a lot easier for me to, you know, I think the difference, there's the energy impact and then there's the impact of the message itself. The message itself, that's where I'm like, I'm just sharing what's coming through. That's the channel part. That's me seeing the story and the themes and everything else. That part I release almost immediately because it didn't come from me, so I don't retain it, right? But the energy part is a little bit different, and that is more of the releasing and not carrying it. So yeah, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword in a way. Yes, so thankfully the messages themselves tend to release pretty quickly, but the energy lingers.
Yeah, I can imagine. Even I feel that in the work I do. I think we all absorb energy, especially when we are empaths. Or your energy, we just believe in that to start with. But we do, I can just imagine that how much energy you're absorbing. And I just think you've done really well. And I think it's like anything in business in life, you learn from the lessons. So from the hotline, you then were able to know how to deal with it next time. And I think that's for Avi. It's just trusting the lessons, isn't it? Trusting the journey. But yeah, I love what you do. And I believe we may do a little reading perhaps. We chatted about this beforehand. If we've got time to do it. Have we got time, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely.
So talk
Absolutely.
us through this because I've gone to events and we've had the cards around, but I've never officially had a reading. So for anybody listening who maybe hasn't as well, I'd love you to talk us through what it is and if there's any top tips for how we perceive it. Perhaps I'm quite open anyway, but yeah, talk us through it.
Yeah. So fun fact with about tarot cards in general, they used to be playing cards like 400, 500 years ago when they were created. They've been around for about that long. And they're broken into something called two arcanas. So the major arcana is where you see like, the hermit, the lovers, the moon, the sun, things like that. You get those big cards. And then the minor arcana is suits, like playing cards. So fun fact, if I happen to be out somewhere and someone wants a reading and I don't have my tarot, I can do a reading with playing cards because it's very, very similar. So when you have in the minor arcana, you have four suits. You have swords, cups, wands, and pentacles or coins. And if the playing deck, you have hearts, diamonds, spades, and clubs. So it's four suits. It's ace through you have ace, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then you have what's called the page, the knight, the queen, and the king. So it's a little different from playing cards, but it's very, very similar. And then each of the suits, it's funny, each of the suits represent astrology as far as like the elements. So cups are the water signs and emotions. Pentacles, coins is earthy and tangible, the tangible world. And then you have the air signs, which is the swords, and that's all about the mind and the way that your mind perceives things and the lens you look out of and your thoughts. And then you have the wands, which is like passion, creativity, and that's fire signs. You have the passion, the creativity, the drive, think about fire signs, they're very passionate and creative. So they break down into that. But how it works is when someone does a reading, there is something called a spread, and that is where the cards are placed, and each placement has a meaning. And this varies because, and even for myself, some readers don't use spreads. Some readers are just intuitive and just pull cards and just share what comes through. And I've done that as well. Although I usually use a spread unless I feel called otherwise. So a spread is like each placement has a meaning, but then each of the cards have a meaning in the placement. So you have to kind of be able to see the connection. And yeah, so that's kind of the mechanics of it. And then as far as the question itself, depending on the timing that you're looking at, I could do two different readings. One is a little bit more basic, and it's 3 cards, and we'll go over what's working for you, what's a challenged area, and higher self message, and that takes like 5 minutes. Or we could do my higher self spread, which is more like 8 to 10 minutes, and that's 7 cards, and it just goes much more in depth. Do you have a preference, or are you interested in one or the other?
I'm going to let you guide it actually. Yeah, I'll let you read which one you think is going to be most well received or most needed.
Yeah, so if we have the time for the 8 to 10 minutes, I always recommend that one just because you get so much more details. The other one can land just as heavy, but this one is not heavy, but land just as like on point. But the higher self one just tends to you get more of the details, more of the bigger picture. Okay,
Okay.
great. So my next question for you is, I can focus on any area of your life, right? Whether it's business or career or purpose, love, etc. We could focus on any of those areas, or we could see what your higher self wants you to know, which tends to be general, but also meets you where you are. So is there an area that you'd like to focus on?
I think I'm intrigued by the higher self. I think, yeah, I'm going to be as open as I can with this and see what is coming my way, which, yeah, I'm just loving this. This is something completely new, this podcast. I've never had anything like this before. So, yeah, thank you, Sarah. You just bring something, yeah, a different dimension to it. So, yeah, whatever I need to know, whatever comes your way, I'm here for it.
Perfect. So yeah, I love higher self messages. Like they tend to, yeah, I've heard time and time again, even if someone had a question in mind, sometimes the question gets answered for them, but they didn't ask it out loud. It's a good way to meet you where you are.
Yeah,
Um, all
love it.
right.
So how many cards do you tend to put out for this? Is it the full deck or is it a certain amount?
So for this spread, it's 7 cards.
7.
Yeah. And so there's going to be a theme, there's going to be past, present, future energies, and then higher self messages overall. And just also to preface, because I don't do predictive type readings. When I say that, it doesn't mean that it's what I say might not play out. I just don't believe the future set in stone. So when I'm reading the future energies, this is kind of where you're headed and to be mindful of. A really cool example that I got recently, I also have my own podcast, and I just recently interviewed the author of a book that helped me with my events. She's a tarot reader as well, and she wrote a book about how to take tarot and do events. And it was so helpful for me, and I was super excited I got to interview her the other day. So to me, it was like interviewing a little celebrity. But the way she describes the future cards, I love it. She said it's like, in the movie or the book The Christmas Carol, and how Scrooge sees the ghost of the future, of Christmas future or whatever. It's kind of like that. It's letting you know, like, as of right now, this is where you could end up if things don't change.
Right.
So, which is the point of that's why he saw it, so that way he can obviously change how things played out for him. So it's that same idea. It's not set in stone. It's just kind of where you're at as of right now. So
Love it. And I think again, in business, in life, that's something everything's quite fluid, isn't it? Things can change. We can impact the direction we're going in. So I love that approach anyway, that it's not set. So yeah,
yeah.
let's see what is waiting. I'm so excited by this.
All right, perfect. So I want to start with the theme card, which I absolutely love. It's the Page of Cups.
Ooh.
And this one is basically saying that right now, in this period of your life, you're really being invited into more play, more joy, more creativity, but specifically from like an inner child perspective. So like right now, there could be more creative invitations. I'm not feeling resistance. So I kind of feel like this is something you're already starting to dabble into, where you're starting to like lean more into like, what did you used to love to do? And what's something now that you can do that lights you up like it did when you were a child, when you were able to see the world with wonder. And so, and again, so this is all about creativity, about joy, about being present, and really just embodying the moment, soaking it in, and finding practices and things that you can do, whether it's, going out with friends and playing, like playing, but, going out and having a good time with friends, or having some kind of a creative project that you could just like dive into and absorb. But this is all about reconnecting with your inner child. So with it being here in the theme, and I'm not feeling resistance, I feel like this is something that you're already kind of leaning into. You're already wanting to be more attached to that wide-eyed little girl that used to be you, that you're trying to be like, I want to bring more of that out into the world and more into me. So that's our starting point. That's the theme. And I think that's super cool.
Love it.
Looking at your
Should I comment? Sorry, should I comment on this as I go along, or just because that straight away I almost got tingles then? If you literally yesterday, I recorded a podcast episode called, oh, I can't remember what it's called. It's about reconnecting with what lights you up. So that's why that really was like, whoa, because I went to a theme park 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago. I've not been to in 25 years. Suddenly, I've reconnected to that joy. I've used all these words that you just said. I find that inner thrill seeking, being a bit more of a big kid. And these are all things that have come out. And I'm actually going to try and bring that into an event to invite entrepreneurs to come with me to that theme park. So, and creativity, I love painting and things. So yeah, I just thought I'd comment on that because I was like, oh, that's straight away. That was quite, I don't know. That was just a moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with me. Yeah, I forgot to mention, feel free to comment and interrupt me if you want, or wait till I'm done. Either way, I'm totally fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to comment as we go, please do. Sorry, I just get so tunneled vision, you know what I mean? But I
I'll
love
try
it
and
when
hold it in. Because the thing is, I've got ADHD and I probably just go, oh, right, I'll say that right now. But I'll get that one out and I'll sit back now and let you do the reading, Sarah.
it was all good. It doesn't mess up the reading if you comment. So it's totally fine. So looking at your recent past, we have the Lovers reversed, which I really like too, because I feel like in a way that may have been part of you reconnecting with your inner child, because the Lovers, I don't read it like the traditional romantic side of it. So the way that I read the Lovers is it's more about you learning that you're already whole. So when you think about like relationships, they say like, oh, you complete your other half and they're going to complete you. And it's no, you're two whole souls and you're coming together, and now you're both adding, and you're being a beautiful addition to each other's life. You're not literally needing the other. It's you are already whole. So the idea of the Lovers is this idea that everything that you desire is already in here. And so sometimes we think our happiness is out there somewhere. Sometimes we think, oh, once I reach this place in my business, then I'll be whole. Or once I get in that relationship, then I'll be whole. Or once I get, whatever it is, it's this idea of once I get there, then I'll be happy. And the thing is, whatever it is you think that thing is going to give you, you can foster and create for yourself now. And it doesn't mean you can't go after that thing. It just means that nothing is attached to it. There's no strings attached. There's no conditions attached. So once you get it, cool, it's a new addition to your life, but your worth isn't at stake, whether you get it or not. And so I feel like in your recent past, that's actually work that you've already been doing, because with it being reversed, I feel like there's a sense of awareness around that, where we're working on this idea of, I'm already whole. I know obviously that comes with a lot. So you probably had to do the, figure out, why am I searching for happiness out there, and trial and error. But I do feel like that's something that you've already tapped into and leaned into. And so I feel like higher self is saying that that's exactly where you're supposed to be, which is opening you up to the inner child work now. And then the present card is the Knight of Cups, which is this one. And so this one is interesting, especially because usually the present card tends to tie into the theme, which was the Page of Cups. I feel like reconnecting with your inner child in that thrill, it brought up a lot of emotions for you. And it kind of brought you a little bit on a emotional roller coaster, where maybe you were like missing, like maybe even seeing where maybe you were missing out when you weren't attached to or connected to your inner child. And now you're like, oh my gosh, where's that been this whole time? And so there's a bit of a overwhelm emotionally from it. And so the invitation with this is just, how can you find the balance? And so basically reconnecting with your inner child kind of was like a little bit of a tidal wave for you. And now you're kind of being asked, okay, now let's even that out, and find a way. Because otherwise what happens is with the Knight of Cups, sometimes you can get triggered and react kind of from this place of like, the analogy I like to use for this card is, if your emotions were a cup of water, your water sloshing around a little bit. And the idea is you want your water to be level. So I do feel like it was very positive that you reconnected with your inner child, and that's a new theme for you. But I do think that it's bringing up some old things for you too. It's like it's bringing the good, and then there's maybe some traumas or negative things you haven't dealt with that's coming up as well. And so there's this invitation of, okay, how can you balance it out? Yes, this still needs to be worked on, especially with the Lovers here, this idea of happiness being outside of you. That may have even been something given to you as a child, that may have been connected to that as well, this idea that you have to heal. But yeah, so there's this invitation to balance out emotionally and keep doing this inner work of being whole. Before I continue, is there anything you want to call? I don't want to like, so I know sometimes you, like for me, I have ADHD, but always my train of thought. So if you want to comment.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think we're doing amazing as a podcast, both of us, not losing our train of thought. This is groundbreaking. Two ADHDers having a conversation is great. But yeah, there is something that comes up. Yeah, there is something that comes up for the first one, but I can't quite put my finger on it. I think I need to like think about that more. The last one that you read, and I'm forgetting which ones they're called, but yeah, there's something around that you said about something from my childhood, and it's actually really, again, quite powerful that I started to think of these things before I went to that theme park, really reconnected with that side. But there was something coming up recently that, yeah, I've had a realization around my childhood. It was a very good childhood, but there's something that I was missing and lacking. And you're right, that has definitely come to the forefront recently. And it feels like something I'm having to really deal with now, so many years on. So that's where that one seems to fit at this moment in time. But yeah.
Yeah, especially because especially with you saying you reconnected with your inner child a couple weeks ago, it probably subconsciously brought things up from your childhood. And I love that you also mentioned you had a good childhood, but there's still something there. So there's something called big T trauma, and there's something called little T trauma. Big T trauma is like abuse, that sort of thing. Little T trauma is just maybe when you didn't get your needs met. And it wasn't the fault of your caregiver. They were doing their best. They didn't know how to meet those needs, but they still weren't met. So it can come, even when you have an amazing childhood, there's usually still things in there that, especially if you didn't ever look at it that way, it could be coming up as like, oh, hold on, there's something in here we got to look at. So moving into the near future, I have two cards. First, I have the Five of Pentacles, and then how interesting. And the Seven of Wands reversed is like the higher self message to the near future. So this one, the Five of Pentacles, it's kind of a mindset card. It's the difference between lack mentality and abundance thinking. And the Five of Pentacles is more of the lack side. So I kind of feel like especially with the theme being more childhood, I kind of feel like this is where it's sticking at. It's speaking to dealing with maybe some of this trauma and this past pain that you just didn't know was there. But moving into the near future, there's this, you might come to a place where you might feel like you don't have the resources to work through it. So if you look at this particular card, you see she's kind of laying down, looking really just like she gave up, and like she doesn't have anything. She feels like she's left alone. She's got nothing. But up here, if like this was resources, she's got plenty, but her back is to it. She's not seeing it. She's kind of already given up, so she's not going to see it. And the invitation around this card is, if you feel like you don't have the resources, that's when you need to look for them. Because as you said before, the universe has our back. It wants to see us succeed. If you look for it and you believe they're there, they will be there. If you don't think they're going to be there, you don't look, you'll never find it because you're not looking. So I feel like when it comes to doing, from what I'm seeing here, I do feel like you're stepping into a bit of a healing journey, specifically around your inner child. I don't know if have you heard of inner child work? Is that something that you're familiar with?
Yeah, I've read quite a lot on it, and I think that really does make sense. And it's quite new realizations that I didn't even know were there. I think I've already almost sort of skipped that part. If I've seen inner child, I've thought it's not really relevant to me. And it's funny how different stages in your life something pops up and it's glaringly obvious now. I'm like, oh, yes, it is relevant, but maybe I just wasn't ready to deal with that.
Yeah, and especially again for those that had really good childhoods, it can almost be hard to look at their caregiver, because you obviously you probably have a good relationship with them and everything else, and then being in a position where now you're kind of seeing where maybe your needs weren't met. There could be some feelings around that too, like you don't even want to look at it because you don't want to see them differently. but also understanding that they're human and they were doing the best they could with the resources they had, so you can have that compassion for them and for you. But I do feel like ultimately, like, that's kind of what's coming up, is this idea of you've got some inner healing, especially with your childhood and your inner child. So I feel like moving into the near future, one of the invitations and possible cautions is, if you start to feel like you don't have the means to deal with it, or you start to feel this like, and there could even be fears of being rejected or abandoned too, that comes with that, because you might want to say something to your parents and, say that this was something you experienced, even though, they didn't mean it that way. And that could bring fears of rejection and abandonment. But there's definitely this idea, like, higher self is letting you know, like, it's there. All the resources to help you move forward and heal this is there. You just have to look for it and know that it's there. So if you get to a point where you kind of feel like you're alone, that's when you really need to, like, use more of that abundance mindset and no, there's something else more that's going to help me through this. And then the higher self message to the near future is the 7 of Wands reversed. This one is very similar to the Knight of Cups. That's why I said I was like, oh, interesting, because the Knight of Cups is more of that emotional roller coaster. 7 of Wands is specifically speaking to triggers. So getting triggered. And when we get triggered, it's basically when in the moment you're feeling old feelings from your childhood. Like your childhood you is getting these big feelings, but because of the subconscious, it's coming through as if it's happening in this moment, but it's not related. And so you might get more defensive. You might tend to maybe, project or have some backlash or some big feelings that, and so the invitation around the 7 of Wands is, when you feel those big feelings coming up, how can you step aside and kind of sit with yourself for a second and be like, okay, do I need to correct this person in my that this is happening with? Or is this somehow paralleling something that happened in my childhood that has nothing to do with them? So it's like, do I need to heal myself and not go after this person because they're probably fine? I don't want to burn that bridge. Or do I need to set some boundaries? And it could be both. It could be like, oh, we got to draw a line here and we got to talk. But with this card, it could go either way. So when you find yourself getting triggered, and it could be a combination of both. It could be you don't want to overdo it because of past feelings, but you still need to set some boundaries. But it's just getting really more clear on, like, what's happening in here. So don't be surprised if into the near future you do find yourself reacting or getting defensive in ways that aren't characteristic to you. And then if you find that happening, definitely kind of get curious and figure out where it's coming from, because I have a feeling like, with all this invitation to inner child work, it's probably something that has to do with something that happened in your childhood.
Yeah.
So before I move on to the next card, so do you want to comment on that?
I'm not sure. I'm just trying to think myself that there's a lot there, and I'm just loving this because it's opening my eyes to interpret things differently. And I guess that's the work you do. And again, back to that abundance mindset of not being too fixed on this. And I can see why people could respond negatively to this, because there was a little bit of resistance, and then I let that go, and I thought, no, invite this in. I'm going to learn from something from this. But I can't think something specifically. There are a couple of things in there that, again, you can't share. That's the thing, isn't it? When I'm on my own platform, I'm not used to this actually being so personal, and I'm really enjoying it. But there are a couple of things in the family, shall we say, going on at the moment. There's definitely some niggles, and there's definitely some things coming up. So I can definitely resonate with it, and it might help me to look at that a little bit differently. But yeah, everything you're saying, I can connect the dots to something that I'm experiencing at the moment.
Yeah, that's good, because I feel like with this here, it's just higher self letting you know, like, you're going to be okay. It's just this is how you can reframe moving forward. So I love these next 2 cards, because this is kind of like the meat and potatoes of what you're being called into. So we have the Hierophant. It's one of my favorite cards. This one is all about peeling away conditioning and programming that was given to us. And it wasn't like it was given to us maliciously, right? It was just, family or society. It was just like, well, that's how things are done. You do X, Y, Z, and that's that. And now there's more things are more malleable. There's more fluidity. People are, I know, especially in your work, you're an entrepreneur. You do your own thing. You're not, conforming to the 9 to 5, things like that. So the idea of the Hierophant is to peel back what was given to you. So these ideas like, oh, 9 to 5, get married, have 2 kids, have a picket white fence in a yard, like go to university or whatever, like all the different things. Those are all programs and conditions that were given to us. So so a lot of what's going to come up for you, and probably what will probably even be triggered for you, is you're being invited into doing some serious self-reflection and figuring out what was given to you and then what's actually yours, and removing what's not yours and removing what was given to you that you're like, that doesn't align with me anymore. It was given to me and I appreciate the thought behind it, but it's not for me. It's not mine. And there could be pushback. So especially when the Hierophant comes up, when you're basically learning how to step into your own self-sovereignty and into your own ideas and into your own belief system. And instead of looking outward, you're looking inward for that guidance. And when you have society or family or people who think you should do it differently and you don't, and you're able to confidently say, thank you, but no thank you, you might get pushback from those that are like, well, hold up, there's a reason it's in place this way and you should do it this way. So the Hierophant is really all about figuring out what's yours, what's not yours, and then acting accordingly and picking and leaning into what's yours and then trusting your own guidance. So I feel like that's a lot of what's coming up is, whatever you were taught, it doesn't align with you anymore. And I mean, not, that's broad. Certain parts of what you were taught and handed to you doesn't resonate with you anymore. And I feel like that's kind of what's coming up, is really being able to get clear on that. And then the other card that came up is the King of Wands. This is one of my favorite cards. So I feel like this is kind of like where you're headed. Like once you're able to work through this and really grow from this experience, the King of Wands, I like to say, it doesn't have a glass ceiling. It's literally you're tapping into your leadership, your creativity. And the biggest part about the King of Wands is he doesn't follow anyone else's footsteps. He's not trying to do it the way anyone else is doing it. He's like, that's a nice trail over there, but I'm gonna go grab my machete and we're gonna go off-roading over here. We're gonna make our own trail. And that's the beauty of the King of Wands, is you're gonna do it your own way. And I feel like that's why you're in this position where you're starting to peel back layers and figuring out like, what's me, what's not me, what feels good to me, what aligns with me. I'm going to take that trail, that particular path. So I feel like everything here is actually leading you to this place where you're going to really shine and be in your own power and be in your own creative leadership skills. And probably don't be surprised if you have people that learn to follow you. Like you're blazing a trail for others to follow as well. So you're really creating your own future, is what I'm feeling. Like you're like, no, I'm not gonna do it that way. I'm gonna do it my way. Like that's the big part of it. It's gonna be my way. And I think that right now, part of your inner child work is figuring out who was Carly when you were younger. And maybe there were parts of you that was silenced, and wasn't allowed to come out. And now it's starting to come up now, and it's gonna help you guide where your life is gonna go now.
Love it. Yeah. And again, I'm just nodding along because I guess I do consider myself like a change maker, a trailblazer, but there's some parts I do probably hold back on at the moment that it's interesting what you're saying. I'm a bit of crossroads where I'm feeling like I should niche a certain way and I know I can help people down that route. This is probably where this is coming from. So I always do things different way. I just don't conform. I always do my own thing, but there's probably something else that at the moment I am toying with something, but back to that self-judgment, well, not self-judgment, but judgment from others and ruffling feathers. There is something that if I do take this route, it could unearth all sorts. It could cause problems over here where I've been part of that. It's hard to say it, but part of a certain group of people in business. I kind of want to take this. What I do in human design, I'm actually a generator and I respond to things and think I can make it better or know I can make it better. That's where I'm at the moment. So there's this model over here. I'm not feeling it. And actually, I want to take it over here, flip it on its head, and have something for the people that don't resonate with that. So that's what I'm taking from it. And that's kind of where I'm at the moment. So yeah, I love it.
That's awesome. Yeah. And don't be surprised if something from your childhood actually helps you figure that out, like really be like, oh yeah, when I was younger, I used to love to do that. And that felt really good. And that ties into this other thing that I really feel drawn to. And so, because yeah, there's definitely this invitation of the child work, but there's also an invitation to do it, not just do it. It's so funny because the King of Wands is like, do it your own way. The Hierophant is like the stepping stone to get there, because the Hierophant is all about getting rid of what isn't yours. And so it sounds like there's pieces of you that's just not in alignment because you feel like especially when we're plugged into something, we don't want to, like you said, ruffle feathers or rock the boat, but you don't want to stay where you're not you either.
Love it. And this is all part of my journey. And anybody listening, in fact, is that the same episode that I recorded? It was about your journey and how things that used to light you up maybe don't some more, about reconnecting. I feel like this ties in so beautifully, and this will probably be out. I'm doing a little mini series. So anybody listening or watching on YouTube, I'm doing a mini series every solo episode since the last one. In April, May 2024, there's about a period of 6 where I'm calling it You and Your Journey. So I'm actually doing all these beautiful, lovely self-awareness, self-growth, quite spiritual solo episodes, that this is going to fit so nicely in the middle of that, Sarah. So I'm so glad that we've had this chat. So grateful for the card pull that you've just done and for talking us through it, and just for your time. It's just been such an eye-opener. I thought I knew things about cards, but actually you've brought so much to it. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for being open-minded and, allowing me to share my experiences, because that's part of why I want to do podcasts, and I do my podcast, and I do what I do is I want to help open minds and help change some of that stigma and taboo, because honestly, there's nothing scary about tarot. The cards themselves, they're just paper. It's a tool. It's a tool for something higher, more beautiful to come through.
Yeah, I love it. And what we'll do, we'll share all the links will be in the show notes. So can people just book directly with you for readings if they want to contact you and just book in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is spiritjourneycollective.com. And so I offer a couple different readings. I offer one-on-one sessions. And so those are like, if you want to sit with me, and it'll be similar to what you witnessed here. It would just be a little bit longer and more in depth. And so you can work with me directly that way. And I also offer email readings as well, which, if you want to like get a reading now and maybe you don't want to schedule with me, or there's scheduling issues, and email readings are great fallback because you'll receive it within 24 hours and it's a personalized voice recording. So there's that as well. And then I'm on Instagram at spirit_journey_collective. And I'm on that pretty often. And so if you want to reach out to me or follow me, please do. I also have my own podcast, which I briefly mentioned, but it's called Spirit Journey Collective. And Carly, actually, she's going to be on the episode that's going to drop later this week. So I'm excited to put that one out there. But yeah, it's all about journeys and people finding their purpose and sharing how they did what they did and what they're doing now. It's amazing.
Yeah, love it. Oh, well, thank you so much. I can't wait to first of all see our chat, actually, because I'm forgetting now what we talked about. But I love the fact that we've just kind of done a podcast swap, and we'd be able to be on the opposite ends of that. And that's a top tip for AB who has a podcast about get out there and being a guest as well, because it's just been really beautiful to chat to you both ways. And yeah, go and connect with Sarah. Go and listen to her podcast. Have a look at the readings. I love the fact I was just giggling to myself there a little bit, thinking how technology has come on. Can you imagine years ago saying that you could have an email reading when people were when the internet didn't exist? It was just sit there and do, wasn't it? So I just love that you can just do that over email. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and I do have some people who will ask me like, well, does that matter? Like, if you don't see me or connect with me, like, is it really going to be as good as a one-on-one session? And it is, honestly. So like I said earlier, it's all about intention. So if you're showing for the intention of, I need guidance around such and such, and I'm showing for the intention of being the channel, that's literally all it takes. I do several email readings where, well, pretty much all my email readings, except for a select few, I never see them or speak to them. There's no actual direct connection. And yet over and over again, I get the feedback that it landed and it was what they needed. So it doesn't matter. So if anyone's listening and they're like, well, is an email reading really as good? It's the quality doesn't change. So if you want to work with me directly where you can get that live interaction, that's live sessions. But if you don't need that and you just need the clarity, the email one works just as well.
Love it. For anybody who is, I always say I'm an extroverted introvert. Is that the right way? Yeah. So I can imagine if people are really introverted and just do not like connecting with it on Zoom or the phone wouldn't do it. But yeah, I can imagine the email being really good for them as well if they just want to do it like that. So yeah, love it. Yeah, go and connect. Go and check out all the links. And thank you, Sarah. You've just been such an amazing guest. That's been something completely different. But again, I feel like it's really needed in everything I'm focused on at the moment with those solo episodes. It's just, yeah, it's perfect. And I do believe the universe just brings us what we need. And even yourself, you are a gift to this podcast, Sarah, because I do think it'll fit in so nicely. So thank you.
Well, thank you for swapping with me. I mean, it was such a pleasure to have you on my podcast and chatting with you and sharing, and hearing your story. And I'm just so grateful to have that same opportunity. And yeah, I love it. It was great.
Love it. The power of connection, people, right there. So go out and connect. Thank you so much, Sarah. We will chat hopefully soon.
Thank you.